Hello, and welcome to Day 1, the Introduction to Positive Behavior Support. My name is Stephanie Benson, and I'll be leading us through this webinar today. The purpose of today is to talk about the organizational changes that we've been making throughout Minnesota, the roles that we have within positive behavior support. We're going to look at person-centered practices as the foundation for PBS. We're going to talk about learn some universal positive behavior support strategies and how to build positive social interactions. So here's a look at our map. It shows the different regions of Minnesota that we've been working in so far. As you can see, there have been 3 different cohorts and 4 different regions of Minnesota. We're looking at increasing our training and hopefully expanding to more and more regions of Minnesota. So far, we have a total of 21 different organizations that have been working with us. And we take these teams through training layers of team training, coaches training, there's person-centered thinking trainings, picture of a life training, and of course, this training, which will lead you to become a PBS facilitator. So positive behavior support, or PBS, has a lot to do with improving quality of life. That's one of the main outcomes that we're looking at. So how do we improve quality of life for the individuals that we support? Well, it comes down to that intersection between the systems that we have in place, the type of data that we're collecting, and the practices that are already within our organization. And how can we change and shape those practices and systems and data collection systems so that we're looking at the outcomes that we want to see, so that we can support staff behavior, support decision making, and really to support all people within our organization. Person-centered practices and planning. We have our beautiful triangle here that we'll be revisiting quite often. At the universal stage, we want to look at universal person-centered strategies. We want to encourage self-expression and self-determination and using choices to make meaningful participation in the community. At the secondary stage, we monitor our person-centered thinking action plans. We might have some additional quality of life strategies, and we might increase strategies for supporting independence and community, and we might also look at some mental health or wellness interventions. At the tertiary stage, we might do an in-depth person-centered plan and integrate person-centered planning and trauma-informed care and positive behavior support, all while the whole time teams are monitoring our progress through their plans. When it comes to our workforce alignment, the attrition of staff may indicate that we need to do something to increase their skills so that staff attrition decreases. So we want to look at organizational workforce development. We want to align policies and practices to be person-centered. Maybe we revise our job descriptions and our performance evaluation, and we're using data to make decisions. At the secondary stage, we may use some simple problem solving for challenging situations that occur more than once. We might have some targeted strategies. We train maybe small groups of individuals to help support that home or that program. At the tertiary stage, we're tailoring that problem solving for specific problematic situations. And we're individualizing training to address unique settings where that problem occurs. In positive behavior support, we're looking at what do all people need. So at the universal level, we're encouraging and teaching communication. We want to have predictable and proactive settings. We want to spend more time preventing forest fires than actually putting them out. So we want to encourage and reinforce social skills and put an emphasis on using data for decisions. At the secondary stage, it might be some simple small group interventions or additional supports for some key social skills. We might integrate mental health and wellness interventions into our plans. At the tertiary stage, this is where we might conduct a functional behavior assessment or integrate other supports. We come up with our individualized PBS plans for an individual that we might be supporting. So the first step that we need to accomplish is to establish a person-centered environment. So how do we do this? Well, one of the core features of person-centered planning is the idea of important to and important for and the balance between them. So we need to talk about what is important to the person, what is important for the person, and how do we balance those things. So for example, something that might be important to a person might be something like smoking cigarettes, but it's not necessarily important for them, but it's important to them. And things that are important to us will help us live satisfied, content, comforted, fulfilled, and happy lives. And by allowing an individual the opportunity or the ability to smoke their cigarettes, even though we may disagree with that because it's not the most healthy of choices, it might be important to them. And so we need to balance those things. So maybe it's about maybe not smoking a whole pack a day, but maybe a few a day. So the balance between important to and important for. How are they organized? What will it look like? How will these tools be used? So we have our different learning and practicing tools that can be divided into 3 different categories. We've got discovery and listening tools such as Good Day, Bad Day, or routines and rituals, or relationship map. We have everyday learning tools such as the 4+1, or what's working and not working. And then management tools for things like matching profiles or using the donut. So there are 3 levels of change that we're going to look at making within our organization. Level 1 is any changes that result in a positive difference in the lives of the people who use your services or who work in your own or in your own work life. So these are changes that we can make on a personal level in our day-to-day lives. These are things that anybody can make. You don't need permission to implement it. These could be changes in things such as routines or rituals, and these are changes that can be made immediately. Level 2 changes are changes within an organization that we might make to practices or structure or rules that result in positive differences in the lives of people. These do require approval from management because it's a change in a practice or policy or structure. The need for a level 2 change is best identified by having a structured way for the shared learning of direct support so that they can go to the organization's leadership and let them know what they might need. And then at level 3, that's any change in practice or structure or rules made at the systems level, so at the state level or national organizational level. You might want to, these are the bigger changes that we're going to work to make throughout the course of our process. So the 5 elements of well-being, we have positive emotion, engagement, meaningful relationships, finding meaning in life, and feelings of accomplishment. And these are all the elements of well-being as identified by John and Connie O'Brien that make for a better person-centered life. Some different person-centered planning methods. We've got picture of a life, path or maps, essential lifestyle planning, personal futures planning, and circles of support. And these are all different methods of training or methods of person-centered planning that you could engage in a training for or become certified as a trainer. Person-centered planning meeting tips. So we want to make sure that the person that we're supporting is actively involved, that we're not just talking over somebody or about somebody, but actively involving them in the conversation. The planning meetings should be based on the strengths and the preferences of that individual that we're supporting and not focused on the concerns or the challenges that the individual might face. We also want to make sure that there are clear goals that are established for the meeting so that we can have a successful meeting so that everybody at the table understands what's expected and what we're going to be doing. So these are all the foundations for person-centered planning as we move into positive behavior supports and universal PBS strategies. What is positive behavior supports? So positive supports refers to all practices that include the following characteristics. They're person-centered interventions that demonstrate cultural competence and a respect for human dignity. They're evidence-based and promising practices. They include strategies for ongoing assessment and monitoring at individual and at the organizational level. And they're often implemented in combination with more than one practice. So it's not that positive behavior supports is done on its own. It's often in conjunction with person-centered thinking or person-centered planning or with some other type of positive support. Here are some examples of different positive support strategies or activities that you could be involved in. So there's person-centered thinking and planning, which is foundational for positive behavior support. We have our positive behavior support, applied behavior analysis, cognitive behavior therapy and dialectical behavior therapy are great mental health awareness strategies, motivational interviewing and wraparound planning, trauma-informed practices, and school-linked mental health. So we want to work to change our understanding of positive behavior support. For many people and for many providers in Minnesota, when we think about positive behavior support, we think only about those individualized interventions, so those interventions that occur at the top tier of the triangle. These are interventions that are based on individuals with intense needs. They're assessment-based. You might associate this with a functional behavior assessment, and it's appropriate for professionals across agencies and systems. But that's not all we want to think about positive behavior support as. We also want to think of it as a framework for prevention. So positive behavior supports at the bottom of the triangle, we're looking at supporting all people, not just individuals who might engage in challenging behavior, but all individuals who engage in any kind of behavior and who might need some support in engaging in positive social interactions. We work together to create a plan and prompt, teach, and encourage those positive social interactions. We want to give opportunities to overtly practice those new social skills in an environment that's safe and conducive to learning something new. We want to reinforce and recognize and celebrate the successes of those individuals that we're supporting and of our staff, and come up with consistent responses to problematic social interactions. So the whole idea is that we're changing the way that we're working. It's a shift in paradigm of fighting fires to building capacity within organizations. Whether it's a contracted service provider, a residential or day treatment program, I see our role as helping people build capacity. So really what we're doing is we're not trying to fix other people, but it's a way to think about behavior change. Because we can't change other people as easily as we can change ourselves. When we change others, others usually follow suit. So changing the environment can really make a difference. It's about, we're spending all this time, a lot of times, putting out fires, addressing those crisis situations. And the whole idea of positive behavior supports is to try to change that focus on putting out the fires to instead preventing them from ever happening. So some of the major goals of universal positive behavior supports is to promote positive social interactions, design those predictable and proactive environments that are positive in nature. We want to establish database decision-making systems, having a consistent response to problems. That way individuals that we support know what to expect instead of having, one staff behave one way when they engage in one type of behavior and have another staff behave another way. So the whole idea, again, is that we're trying to enhance that quality of life and prevent problem behavior. Positive behavior supports is the integration of valued outcomes, behavioral and biomedical science, validated procedures, and systems change. It's not that we're trying to change the individuals that we're supporting, but instead it's about us taking responsibility and changing our own behaviors so that we can help change those interactions. So some assumptions and values. One of the ideas is that we're interdependent, that we all help each other to be our best selves, and that everyone can improve their social skills. I'm sure we've all been at a meeting where things got a little tense, and we know that, those positive social interactions aren't always as positive as we would like. And so we know that even ourselves, we can improve our own social skills. Even when we don't know the right way to model that, so we might know the right way to model good social behavior, but we don't always choose to. So sometimes we choose to engage in other behaviors in order to get our needs met. So primary universal strategies for person-centered practices, we look at using those person-centered thinking tools and implementing person-centered strategies. It might be that as an organization, we're building capacity for person-centered thinking and picture of a life. On the PBS side, we're learning to identify social values, to practice those social behaviors that go along with those values, and how do we improve the social and physical environment that we're engaging in. Here are some examples of universal social strategies, and you can find all of these on the mnpsp.org website. There's person-centered thinking strategies. The AAIDD Positive Behavior Support Curriculum is very interesting and informative. The Tools of Choice Social Skills Curriculum, Health and Wellness Strategies, and strategies to increase positive social interactions. At the secondary stage, we're looking to continue expanding that impact of work plans across areas. Our teams are going to monitor quality of life data. Maybe we come up with some simple strategies for improving quality of life. And we build those natural support networks. And for PBS at the secondary stage, this is where teams start to monitor for early intervention. It might be some simple function-based problem solving and using data to make decisions. At the tertiary stage, again, we continue to expand our work plans across areas. We want to monitor our person-centered plans and use quality of life data for decision making. On the PBS side, we're going to coordinate quality of life evaluation across those positive supports. We're always using data to make decisions, and the PBS plans are now integrated within that person-centered plan. So I think this is a nice quote to think about how we all engage in behaviors, and some of them are challenging, but not all of them. So the quote, almost everybody I work with has behavior, including staff, that is problematic to them on a daily basis. I mean, we need to not think of it as problem behavior, but maybe instead we think of it as behavior that challenges us. Just some important elements to consider when making your positive behavior support plans. We want to make sure that we're thinking about person-centered thinking and planning, about that organizational workforce and how it's related. Cultural competence is always important as we move forward as a society, and then positive behavior support. So how do we build positive social interactions? So to create a positive environment, we need to make sure that our needs are met at the base level. We want to encourage our direct support professionals to be a model of good behavior. If life is good, if our needs are met, if we have choices, if events are predictable, if people are listened to, and quality of life is being assessed, we're less likely to engage in some of those challenging behaviors because we don't need to get our needs met. So who is involved in building these positive social environments? Well, that's all people. People receiving services and support, staff members, managers, administrators, family members, guardians, advocates, community members. It's everybody that we want in our community of positive social environments. And one way that we can build and work at measuring our positive social interactions is through a tool called the Matrix. Some of you have already heard about the Matrix and maybe have one in place and are working with Jessica or I to really develop and measure and determine how we're working within, how are we expressing those values? Are we doing a good job in having these positive social interactions? In order to develop a matrix, everyone works together to list those key person-centered values. We want to identify the social behaviors that reflect these values, creating a plan to increase those social interactions, and support and recognize each other through helping, encouraging, and prompting. So here's some examples of how we've assessed the social interactions in the environment. So a mental club health example. For these individuals, they created a matrix as a guide and shared with 2 other coaches. The coaches actually used some flip chart paper and organized into 4 groups with a coach facilitating each group. And they started talking about what works and what doesn't work at the clubhouse. They identified times of day that were important and completed that section. The group shared results and then identified what person-centered values and social behaviors were in place when the clubhouse works well. And then they come up with next meeting steps. Here's an example of a matrix. So on the left-hand side, you can see our positive social values. So things like respecting each other, having a positive attitude, working together. And across the top, we see times of day. So things like free time, cleaning up, lunchtime, fundraising, during outside activities. Within each cell then, so between respecting each other and free time, we come up with observable behaviors that describe that time. So it might look like respecting each other during free time looks like respecting another's privacy and understanding differences. Or respecting each other during cleanup might be offering to help each other and talk to each other kindly if something isn't working. This just kind of breaks it down so you can see it a little bit closer. Having a positive attitude in free time, so being aware of your environment and be aware of how others' feelings are different. The clubhouse participants also created these thank you notes and give each other recognition and thanks when they see examples of the positive social values. So you can see some of their thank you cards, thanks for your help, thanks for listening. There's lots of examples of these positive ways to celebrate success. And it doesn't have to be a high-tech system. It can be something simple, like just these note cards. So the clubhouse, they also created lots of visual reminders of those key person-centered values. So they talk about respect, give it to get it. Someone's a great artist at this place, so they have lots of pictures. So take care of our space. And then more artwork that's under construction at the clubhouse. They've really done a great job really making it visual, a lot of their key ideas. So some other examples of the matrix. So at the county level, a lot of times what we're seeing is individuals or groups wanting to look at their meeting processes. So instead it's looking at those values within their meetings, before meeting, at the beginning of the meeting, while person's sharing information. And what are our values? So show your respect for people, demonstrate appreciation of culture, and then in each cell talking about what that might look like explicitly. In residential settings, I know groups have gotten together, with all of the people that live together and have gone through, talking about what their values are and what different times of day might be important for that as a group. I've also seen it done where a manager might meet individually with each resident and then form a consensus, kind of come up with some ideas, and then present the ideas to the group as a way to build consensus. So we're going to do a brief overview of some strategies to reinforce and teach new skills. This is something that as we move through these PBS training days, we're going to learn more and more strategies of how to do this. So one way to look at in-service training and staff is to create skits that show examples and non-examples of that positive social interaction. So taking something like respect, what would that look like? Review a person-centered value and ask staff to make up a skit for each location and setting, including an example and non-example, and then schedule some opportunities to practice. You could create activities with skits, so having them act out a non-example of a social interaction and then have them act out a positive example. So we're going to go through these 4 strategies of ways to teach new skills, so a task analysis, shaping, prompting, and reinforcement. So when we practice our social behaviors, we want to access the ability of people living or working in a setting with staff. We want to create a plan to explicitly teach those new skills and then schedule opportunities to practice those skills. Reinforcement, so one of the guidelines I've seen out there is to try to have 6 reinforcing comments to 1 directive or 1 negative comment. So trying to keep the atmosphere or the environment much more positive. So I know, when we're working with individuals, there's a lot of things that we need to get done in our day in the course of our job. It might be that you need to make sure that the laundry is done, that meds are taken, that beds are made and clean and dishes are done, and there's a lot of chores that need to be accomplished. And so we often find ourselves, through no fault of our own, but giving a lot of directives, like go do this, go do that, time for this, hey, let's make this together. So we want to try to intersperse some of those comments with positive comments as well. So saying things like, I love how you got your materials together and you're ready to do your laundry. That looks amazing. We want to focus on our values in action. We want to celebrate successes. We want to talk about what are the good things that people are doing. How do we model and practice those social interactions, and how do we emphasize the value of those social interactions? Thank you for attending today's webinar on Positive Behavior Supports Day 1.